Welcome to episode number 23 of the Castbar. 6.2 is going live onto the PTR, which means that there's a tsunami of news crashing upon our shores. Good things we're all going to be building shipyards soon. A closer look at patches themselves, hot fixes us for some listener mail, and a review of Magtheridon's Lair. Thank you, and enjoy. Welcome everybody to the Castbar, the World of Warcraft podcast channeling your content with no interrupts. Today is Sunday, April 19th at about 2:15 Pacific Standard Time. With me I have Evan.
How are you doing, Michael?
Doing great, and Florian.
How's it going, guys?
It's going really well. Good to see you guys. Let's go into the news. Welcome to the news, everybody. We went ahead and cut the intro down super short because there's more news to talk about than we might actually be able to talk about. The biggest one, of course, is that 6.2. The patches went live onto the PTR, and a whole bunch of it is just up in the air as to what's actually going to be in the patch. They gave us a whole bunch of cliff notes and said more information is to come. We've assembled everything that currently is to come, and we'll see how that goes for us right now. So, moving into 6.2. First off, most important thing is we don't know when it's going to be getting here. Currently, the testing duration is currently going to be listed in months. That's all we know. They said don't be expecting it to just be a few weeks. They said it's going to be months, and that is everything that we know. So, by that logic, I'm guessing probably release around July. What do you guys think?
I'm thinking July is probably optimistic. No, it's pretty secure bet, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was going to be longer than that, this wouldn't be out yet. I mean, it's a big patch. It's got a whole zone. It's got a raid in it. So there's a lot of things that they still obviously need to polish.
Right.
So they said it'd be listed in months. I don't see them saying that.
Months.
If it was going to be more than 6 months. I see 3, maybe 4.
I think 3 at the least. I think 3 is, we're never going to see it in 3. I mean, 100% sure about that. Maybe 4, 5 areas good. 6, I think you're right that it's too long, but I mean, 6 months would put it at almost October, right? That's not.
Yeah, that would be October. I think. Right, and that's why I say that is because then you're
midsummer, early summer, I think.
Oh, and then you're getting way too close to BlizzCon. Because I feel like they need to have a little bit of a window between the patch and BlizzCon, because at BlizzCon they almost will need to be announcing something new, and I don't think it necessarily will be the next patch. I think it'll be the next expansion. If they're wanting to hold on to this idea of releasing expansions more quickly, which they say that every year, but they're like really trying to push for it right now. So I just wonder if, we'll actually get an announcement for the next expansion, announced at BlizzCon with, one more patch to come, and then let's say this releases in July, August, then 2 months later is 2 or 3 months later is BlizzCon, in which they go, look, here's the next patch. It comes out in a month, and it's, a smaller patch because it's going to be the final patch. And then, so that'll bring that patch out around Christmas, and then the next expansion coming out around March, April next year.
So you think...
It seems like the likely scenario. Actually, I've been thinking the same thing, because I don't want to throw spoilers out there, but no one has said anything about Grommash being in Hellfire, and so far as I can tell right now, he's not going to be. So
and he was the announced final boss.
Exactly. So we've got at least one more good patch in there. And if they want to go to yearly expansions, then in order to have a third patch, the second one would have to come out sometime in the summer. So July seems like a reasonable way to put it.
I'm with Florian there. If there's only going to be one patch after this next coming one, of course I want to dry out the timeline a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be a small patch. I think it's going to be the as big as 6.2.
Well,
to tie up the expansion.
In the original maps of Draenor, there was another island, and I'm not talking about the Ogre continent down in the south-west. There was another island to the northeast of where we are, and so maybe there's another small little... that island will appear kind of like, a Timeless Island or Island of Thunder type thing, and that's where a final... I imagine it'll be a smaller raid that'll have Grommash in it. If... in fact, we don't have Grommash currently. But the other thing is that I could see them doing, which I'd be really annoyed with, is you only fight Grommash on Mythic difficulty.
Is that right?
No. That is not correct. I could just see them doing that. Because
my goodness, no.
We'll go a little bit more into it. Well, here, we'll just move this into the Hellfire Citadel is the next raid that's going to be coming. The bosses that are notably going to be in there is Kilrog Deadeye, a monstrous Gore Fiend, so we're going to kill Terran Gore Fiend again, a reanimated Manaroth, and Archimonde himself. But there is no mention in there of Grommash. And we saw a bunch of strings from achievements for, because there's always the meta achievements. It's like, kill him without setting off any of the bombs or whatever,
Right, yeah.
And there isn't one in there for Grommash. So that immediately tells us that Grommash isn't in the raid, which seems incredibly odd.
Right. No, I'm agreeing with Florian's guess that this information means we're going to have a second Grommash raid, even if it's just Grommash by himself. But I would think it'd be more of kind of a Temple of, or Terrace of the Endless Springs, like sized raid, following something like Heart of Fear, which I would kind of say is the same kind of size as High Mall or Blackrock Foundry. Would you agree?
Well, Terrace of Endless Springs only had 4 bosses, whereas High Mall had 7. So...
Right, but High Mall and Heart of Fear had about the same number of them. And you say Mogu'shan Vaults, Heart of Fear, and then Terrace of the Endless Springs is a little bit of a cap on top. You have High Mall, Blackrock Foundry, and then like a cap on top. Of course, we don't have a cap on top. This is kind of mid-expansion, though, isn't it? I guess it's a different lineup. But what I'm saying is that the next tier that we have coming out, Hellfire Citadel in Warlords of Draenor, having like 7 or 8 bosses, or is it all the way up to 10?
I don't know. I don't remember reading a number for how many bosses, but I remember looking at the list of achievements, and I'd say there's around a dozen. I can pull it up real quick while we're talking.
At any rate, I want to bring some special attention to the fact that you kind of glossed over, but you're just listing the bosses. A monstrous reanimated Terran Gore Fiend. This is the guy that we killed in Shadow Moon Burial Grounds? Or no, in the he fell off the cliff in the Auchenai halls, right?
Correct.
Or Auchenai Temple, right?
Yeah, he was trying to absorb a whole bunch of power and stuff from the place.
Right, and that was a pretty clear indication that we thought that he was going to come back, no problem. But we also thought that Ner'zhul was going to come back from the Shadow Moon Burial Grounds, but there's no indication yet of him showing up in this expansion or in this raid instance.
Correct.
Okay,
so a couple things to note real quick. There is a feat of strength, the standard ahead of the curve or cutting edge achievements, and they're for Archimonde, not Grommash. So that's one thing to note. Where's the rest of those little strings that I was referring to? Which tells me that the final boss of the raid is Archimonde, and it would be so weird for there to be a Grommash something else, especially because almost all of the story is being wrapped up from what I can perceive in this next patch. Because we're finishing up the legendary quest line, we're getting our rings, we're going into Danan Jungle, which is essentially the final zone, we're going into the Hellfire Citadel, we're bringing everything down. But apparently there still has to be another step somewhere for Grommash to technically be the final boss.
He might be in the dungeon itself, and something I'd want to see in order to kind of support this theory is a loot list, because if Grommash is part of the fight, or if he's kind of the boss and you do fight him, but he's not the
like if you fight Grommash and Archimonde at the same time,
something like that, or then I'm sure Archimonde would drop something like Gorehowl, right? I mean, clearly.
Okay, so I found the strings. Let's see, we have defeat Gorefiend, defeat Archimonde, Fellord Zakuun, Hellfire Assault Encounter, which is apparently a boss, the Hellfire High Council, Iron Reaver, Kilrog Deadeye, Cormrock, Manaroth, Shadow Lord Iskar, Sokrathar, Tyrant Velhari, Xulhurak, and that looks like all of them. So that would be, what, 13 bosses?
Yeah. So Sokrathar is one of these Draenei characters from the Shadowmoon Valley questline, isn't he?
Correct. He was one of the, what are they called? The Exarchs that were living in, what is it called? Living in Elidor, which is like one of their little sacred towns that is outside of Karavor. And he killed one of the other Exarchs, and then gave his soul away essentially to the Burning Legion and became one of the big red Eridar-looking guys. And then he went off to live on Sarkathar's Rise, which is the level 100 zone in the southern end of Shadowmoon Peninsula.
Gotcha.
But in all these strings, we don't have Grommash.
And he's not part of any kind of Glory of the Hero meta achievement.
Not that I'm currently seeing? It doesn't mean he's not, but I mean, obviously these are just strings that are data mined. It doesn't necessarily mean they're correct.
Right.
So,
you know, it might either they've changed their mind about the final boss, or they haven't revealed that Grommash will be in this encounter if there's going to be a raid instance after this. I think they're either ignoring it because they don't feel like it needs to be addressed, or they're trying to purposely keep his encounter under wraps.
Maybe. And what if, now I don't like this, but what if it ends up being like a, do we all remember Ruby Sanctum, which was the middle patch between Icecrown Citadel and Cataclysm? It was just a very small, pretty lame patch that was just a one boss raid instance, which was, at the time was, I don't even remember his name, some annoying dragon. Halcyon?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Something like that. But currently, if Grommash is the final boss, we just don't have anything for it. It isn't anywhere. So, I don't know.
What do you think, Florian? Are you stewing in theories and approximations?
I'm not sure right now. I'm still going off the assumption that there's going to be another patch where we will fight Grommash, or maybe befriend Grommash, or do something with Grommash to tie up that storyline. I don't think it's going to be in this upcoming patch, though, because I feel like they need to have at least one more patch after this, just to pad out the time for the next expansion.
Right. No, I completely agree.
So yeah, since they're wrapping almost everything up, they're probably just holding back Grommash just so they have something to give us in that last patch. And they don't have to do the whole Ruby Sanctum thing again, where they just have to totally make up some random boss to appease people.
What I'm thinking is that we've seen Sokrathar, we've seen Gorefiend, and those are just basically quest, bosses from leveling up. And we're going into there, and they are these new raid bosses. I don't think they're on the same level, kind of lore-wise, or hype gameplay kind of wise as Gorefiend, whom we haven't actually seen yet outside of the opening intro. I think he's a much more important character. I think they're going to develop a lot more about him, but he's going to be elevated above, significantly above, Terran Gore and, Shadow Lord A and Shadow Lord B. Does that make any sense?
Yes. It just seems weird because, shouldn't he be in the Citadel? And if he's not, where is he going? Because we have, at that point, taken over everything.
Well, maybe that's something we'll see when we start doing the quests in Tanan Jungle. because we haven't really seen any of the lore that might be in those quests. Maybe that'll hold some answers. Or, once again, since we do have shipyards now, and as you mentioned, Farallon is a very real place, he could very well be hanging out there.
Is that the name of that island? Because I seriously didn't know.
It's spelled Farall. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Farallon or Farallon or whatever, but it's spelled something like that.
Okay.
And yeah, that is the name of that island. I don't know. It's a huge island. It's almost like a continent unto itself.
Sure. I know it's not currently listed on the map, but it was on the map when they were announcing Warlords of Draenor.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be sort of like Tenon Jungle. It was where boost characters would go to get their to learn their class, but apparently Blizzard decided to scrap that. So I'm assuming they got some work done on it. So they might have Farallon just lying around somewhere, and then they decide to use it for 6.3. Of course, that's entirely speculation, but that's how I see it playing out.
Okay, well, you mentioned shipyards, so we'll go ahead and talk about those next. The expansion, essentially, to our garrison that we're getting is shipyards. So it's going to be new naval missions. You don't put your followers on boats. You actually build different boats, and you can get different items to upgrade the boats, and the boats go do their own missions themselves. From my understanding, obviously, all of this, there's very little information currently available to it, but this is my current understanding of how it is going to work. Maybe you have boats and you also put followers on the boats, but from my understanding currently, that's where we're at. I didn't see this one coming.
Yeah, that's a little bit strange. I wonder if the boats themselves are going to be like a follower as a unit, so you can even have missions where you send off your Dark Ranger and your Blood DK and your Bodie McBoderson. You know, on the same mission.
That better be one.
It's a boat-only mission, and one of the followers needs to be a boat.
Well, some of the data mining apparently has found that it's built on the same basic system as the follower mission system, so it's supposed to be a similar thing, where you just build your boats and then you send them on missions in a menu. You know, that's definitely a new thing, but I'm not sure how I feel about that, because we've already got the followers themselves that do basically that thing. We press a button to send them on a mission. I don't see how different this is going to be. You know, what new thing are boats going to bring to the game is my question.
Right. Well, I remember glancing over a couple of the data mine strings, and relating to the boat training, they seem to have little tiny quests to teach you kind of the maneuvering of them. Is that right? Are you seeing that same thing, Michael?
No. I wasn't. No. That's fine. I just wasn't able to find much on the boats, but unfortunately, I did because when I was trying to assemble the show notes, I had so many things to look up. I wasn't able to actually put full research power into all of them. Because that was one of the things that I would like to see, is us be able to control the boats and actually be able to go out there and be on a boat. I'm on a boat.
The kind of volume of the news we just got compared to the past couple of weeks really kind of inundated everybody, haven't they?
Well, yeah, and that was one of the problems. It's like, okay, we have to fill this 2 hours, and we didn't have news for like a month, and now it's like, here's a pile of it.
More news you could possibly even talk about.
Well, and it was like, do you want to split it between 2 weeks? No, because I guarantee you by next Sunday, all of this will be more information on it that we'll need to talk about.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. Brace yourself against the storm, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I thought we were going to get another tier. Like, I remember them saying that there would be a 4th tier of garrison, and it looks like they've done away with that. And instead, now we're going to be looking towards getting this shipyard and less upgrades for the rest of the garrison, because it's all just going to this shipyard.
Interesting.
But it just seems lame.
That all depends on how long they intend to make the expansion completely. After we finish everything and we're ready to move on to whatever's next, how long do they expect that to take? Because if it's going to be 2 years from now, I can't imagine one more raid tier is going to do it, even if it comes out 5 months from now.
No, and that's why I think the next expansion will come out spring to early summer next year.
Wow.
That's just what I think. I could be completely wrong. Blizzard could completely mess everything up again and, bring everything out for us way too late down the road. But I think if they really want to keep up with this, content spree to where it's alive, then that would be about the time frame that they need. They would be closer to, because they want an expansion every year. That'll be closer to, a year and a half, but I think that's much more realistic than every year. But either way, that's where I see it sitting. And I think anything longer than that would be an error on Blizzard's part. Which, whatever ends up happening in terms of their employment and tech and all that kind of stuff and development, I understand they have problems a lot of the time when they're trying to make things, whatever. But looking at this, even though we have tons and tons and tons of content coming up, and plenty more that we still haven't even talked about, unless there is an equivalent amount in 6.3, I don't see this being enough to carry us all the way to the next expansion.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Unless they want to do another situation where it's Siege of Orgrimmar or Icecrown Citadel again, where we have the same raid for a year or 14 months. Which I kind of want to say Blizzard should have learned not to do that by now, but I can't be 100% certain they won't.
They had the Warlords of Draenor expansion announced before Siege of Orgrimmar had even released. So we're not even that far into having the next expansion be announced yet. So I don't think that the last raid tier that we'll see is going to come before then.
The only reason that I question that statement, though, is Blizzard has started to take this option of just... They often go with it'll be released when it's done, right?
Right.
But on that same thing, in their other games, they have just been like, oh, and it's done now, here you go. For the Hearthstone, GVG, one of the expansions, came out a week after they announced it. They announced it at Gamescom or something like that. I don't remember. Maybe it was BlizzCon or something like that. Yeah, it was BlizzCon. Last year, and they're and it's gonna be out this Thursday, and everyone's like, wait, right. What?
But consider this, that Hearthstone content, and even here there's a Storm content, which they also kind of, when they're releasing new champions, pretty suddenly, and those are free-to-play games, so people don't have to invest anything at all in, experiencing that content. But with World of Warcraft, we have a subscription to pay, and we devote a whole lot of time in that. And I think we have to buy the expansion itself. I mean, that could be upwards of $40. I can't remember what Draenor was on release.
$50.
But I think because of the software purchase itself, I think they need to... The hype kind of train runs a little differently compared to Hearthstone.
Well, that's why if they have a big panel at BlizzCon and announce both the next patch and the next expansion, which might be a little bit too heavy for one BlizzCon, but I think that'd be the best way to do it, that would still work just fine. If they just have two panels on 2 different days, on Friday they have a panel for the next patch, and on Saturday they have a panel for the next expansion, that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah, I guess one of them would have to kind of take a back burner, and depending on how far away they were from the expansion, which I'm going to guess is somewhat distant, at least another good BlizzCon before they have to worry about getting people pre-orders and doing all the beta testing and things like that. I'm thinking this BlizzCon will be maybe an unveiling of the... Well, maybe not. I can't decide whether unveiling or announcement is more revealing of the content itself, but some kind of, I don't know, here's a title of it, and that's it. I can imagine doing that kind of release, but focus mainly on the last patch of this expansion.
Maybe, I don't know. The only thing I do know is that this BlizzCon is going to be huge. Huge. Because we should, Legacy of the Void for StarCraft, we should get a date for that since it just went into beta. And I imagine that that's actually a pretty long ways off. Otherwise, it might be released before BlizzCon. Kind of hard to say. Overwatch will probably be... Either it's a beta date will probably be announced if it hasn't already went into beta. And if it has went into beta, then we might get a release date for that. Or there's going to be a lot of information about Overwatch, because by then I hope they'd have the pricing for it, what system they're going with, and then more Hearthstone content, more Heroes of the Storm content, maybe even a release date for Heroes of the Storm. We're going to have at least something for Warcraft, whether it's a patch or an expansion. So there's just this BlizzCon is going to be very, very large, and I think maybe both the patch and the expansion might be too large. But I think if they don't put something on for the next expansion at the BlizzCon or some similar event in the near future, then we're running risk of having a copy of Siege of Orgrimmar happen again.
Which no one wants.
No. I think Blizzard knows that more than anything.
So, I don't know. It's kind of up in the air. But as we talked about, we also have Tanaan Jungle coming along, which new zone, new quest line, and daily quests. Not a whole lot else has been revealed on that. This is gonna be interesting though, because I guess we can compare it to like Throne of Thunder, which was a maximum level questing zone, but we currently don't have one of those in Warlords of Draenor. We have small little like areas like Socrathor's Rise, like I was talking about, but there's like one itty-bitty little quest line that goes along with that, whereas Tanaan Jungle is an entire zone. So it makes me wonder how much is actually going to be going on in here.
Probably a lot, because they pretty much have to tie up all the rest of the plot at this point.
Right. Especially, like, everything has to point to the end at the end of this zone/raid. Because with the legendary quest line done, it means we, in theory, stop Gul'dan, however that ends up ending. Which from there, that means that quest line's done. We'll have taken over all of Draenor, so that thing is done. It sounds like we'll essentially have completely stopped the Burning Legion since we're taking down Archimonde, so that thing's done. We've pretty much completely gutted the Iron Horde, unless they go somewhere else, so that's done. So the only thing left to do is to go get Grommash. But my question at that is, if we've already done all of this other stuff, they have to give or do something with Grommash that gives us cause to go chase him.
Well, yeah, they could really just slap us upside the face with the big old trout of didn't see that coming and say this is the second to last raid tier. After you kill Archimonde, Grommash escapes and goes for the bigger guns, being Sargeras, the Dark One himself, and then you have to stop Grommash from helping Sargeras, transverse into this world because all of his top lieutenants proved to be unworthy of leading such a bloodthirsty people.
I do not see that happening. Just because they've said in the past that they're really trying to avoid using Sargeras for much. So I just don't see that coming to pass anytime soon. Because that's kind of like their end-all be-all ticket, right? Is Sargeras.
Well, that's true. But you have to consider the fact that this is alternate Draenor, which means we will be fighting. If we fight Sargeras, it would be alternate Sargeras. So they can really just do whatever, and it's not really going to matter.
Right.
That is the advantage/disadvantage of alternate timelines. They can use whoever they want for whatever they want, but nothing has a lasting impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think they're going to do anything too spooky like that, like having people from alternate universe Azeroth come through a dark portal and help us kill the Iron Horde, because this is actually before Azeroth was really populated by anything except trolls and night elves, right?
I'm not sure on that. No, well, it shouldn't be that early. Like, humanity exists. This was before the First War.
Right, okay.
Like, this was
on the other side.
Yeah, what we had in Draenor, the Iron Horde invasion against our Azeroth, was what would have been the beginning of the First War, had they not gone to our Azeroth, but instead their Azeroth. So we definitely have humans and all the other various races, except for the undead. They shouldn't exist yet. Although, considering there's going to be a monstrous Terran Gorn fiend, I could see that changing very quickly in this next raid. We'll see, though.
Yeah, it's funny. It seems like there are almost too many plot lines to tie up with one zone or one raid. If they do tie them all up, it'll be huge. And if they don't tie it up, then that'll be a little bit of a letdown. For example, I mean, I want to see how the Arakoa fit into this kind of grand scheme of things, because I think they're just not solitary kind of refugees. I think they do involve themselves in the greater events of what's going on currently that's more relevant to us, although I haven't done very many Arakoa max level quest lines down there in Sethic, so I'm not positive if they actually do go into how they're involved a little bit more than I'm aware of.
They should. Some of the areas in Tanan do have Arakoa in them, apparently. And I think one of the bosses in Hellfire Citadel is also an Arakoa guy, so there should be some more Arakoa lore. And I'm with you on that. Like, I'd like to see more about how they fit into this whole thing. Because up until this point, they've just been kind of second bananas. But I think they play a bigger role.
Their story almost has nothing to... At this point, has almost nothing to do at all with the Iron Horde or anything at all being around. The entire questline in Spires of Iraq is completely separate as you're playing this questline of liberating the Arakoan people from their oppressors that clip their wings and curse them and stuff. So
yeah, there are a couple of different beast races and the band of orcs that are also down there that are kind of antagonists to the Arakoa refugees in that quest line.
That's the Shattered Hand, right? I believe that's Kargas people.
Yeah, interestingly enough, and since their warlord's already been defeated, I mean, I can't imagine they're going to get swept up in everything unless it's just a huge free-for-all at the very end.
Well,
but
you have a couple quests where you go in and take several of them out, and the Shattered Hand is one of the smallest clans because it's just a clan formed from the gladiators that were trapped in Heimdall. So, I mean, in theory, story-wise, they could just all be wiped out now. We could just be done with them.
Yeah, interesting. The other huge piece of the puzzle that is also in Spires of Eric is our good friend, Wrathion. And aside from the journal teaser, I don't think there's a single other reference to him being on the continent whatsoever.
Nope, we've not seen him, we haven't heard from him, nothing. The only thing we know is that Alliance had him in custody for a while. He was in Admiral Taylor's garrison, and Admiral Taylor stepped out, and Wrathion essentially took over, and then left creepy dead guy in charge, which killed everyone and tortured Admiral Taylor, and we haven't heard from Wrathion since.
Yeah, very, very strange to me. So, yeah, I don't think that this dungeon they've just announced is giving us nearly the full picture of the cast of characters involved in it if we're just reducing it to the boss names, or there's just a precursor and there's something else that really involves those people more heavily in the future.
Wrathion infuriates us beyond all belief and helps Grommash escape.
Yeah, I think he's going to try to pair up with the biggest, baddest dude in the whole continent, which might be Grommash, honestly.
Is he, though? Like, we haven't seen Grommash do anything besides taking down Manaroth in the opening cinematic, but other than that, Grommash hasn't been a problem, really, for us in terms of the storyline going through the continents and the quests and stuff like that. We saw him at the very beginning, and that was the only time that I remember seeing him.
Yeah, he's been pretty much a non-entity, and I've just been kind of wondering what's going on with him, because he's too major of a character to just set aside like that, so I really want to see what's going to happen next.
Right.
As far as Grommash is concerned, it's
a completely different situation they put us in Wrath of the Lich King. It's almost the opposite, where we know what the end boss is of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. Clearly, that was never in question from the start. And then every zone, in a lot of the dungeons too, he just pops up and says, "I'm a bad dude, you gotta watch out for me," and then disappears and does something kind of irritating.
Yeah, he keeps taunting you and keeps putting things in your way, whereas that hasn't happened really with Grom. He's just... I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's doing.
Right.
I mean, how far... You finished all of your elemental tablets, right, Evan?
No, not yet.
Because I don't believe he has any involvement even in the Legendary Quest line during the whole Corona thing, after you get the tablets and everything.
Right.
So what his purpose is, besides just being the leader of the Iron Horde, which up to this point we've just kind of been mowing down like weeds.
Right.
What's the word? Like, his aura of power and scariness has just felt very lame and weak up to this point.
Right, we've been seeing a lot more Gul'dan, especially concerned with the legendary quest line, than we have with Grommash himself.
Right, I mean, and like Blackhand, at least with the Talador sequence, we had a reason to dislike him, but I don't have any feeling towards Grom right now because he hasn't done anything that I care about.
Right, so I think that this isn't going to be the last patch for that reason, just because there's so much story building potential that if they crammed into one zone that I could finish in, 6 hours, then I think that would be a little disappointing. And then all I had to do is wait for the raid after that, That would be, that's not the way to finish out an expansion, I don't think. And I think Blizzard knows better than that.
I hope so. But, maybe something else is going to happen in the legendary quest line that we just don't know about yet. That is possible, so we can just see what happens from there, I suppose. But it's kind of hard to say. Because so much could or could not happen. I mean, Gul'dan initially wanted to corrupt Grom, so maybe that's still his goal in some ways? I don't know. Because technically, if he gets control of Grom, then he gets control of the Iron Horde.
Basically, too. And then the Wrathion himself is also playing that same kind of game. Last expansion, he was talking with us directly, each of our own heroes, personally. And also little Varian Wren's son there. But honestly, he's up to something, and I think he's kind of consorting in the same kind of way and trying to, move the wheels of the world, so to speak, from somebody else's, armchair or whatever.
Sure.
And that's either going to be Gul'dan himself, Grommash himself, or I think Archimonde himself if he gets involved with the Burning Legion. I don't see anybody else carrying as much weight or influences to attract his interest.
I don't know. We've been getting so little information about big players that it's really irritating. But, Another note, since I just mentioned that we do finish the Legendary Quest line in 6.2, we've been working on building this ring with Khadgar, and we have now the precursor, what they're currently planning on doing with the Legendary Ring. The current eye level, like the initial ones we saw were 730, the ones that we currently see now are 735, which this seems a little low to me. Because, I mean, like, Mythic Blackrock is giving, 700?
Right.
So that would, presumably, if the next raid is 15 item level higher, then that would make this, raid, Mythic Warforged would be 720 from, Hellfire Citadel. Which means the ring is only 15 higher than that. Which I guess that's about the same place. No, the cloak fully upgraded was much higher, I thought. Because wasn't the highest, 588 from Siege of Orgrimmar?
Yeah, in the 590s. And the cloak highest upgrade didn't break 710, or 610, did it?
It was 616.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much where you'd expect the ring and the highest level gear to be at.
Unless there's another raid.
In which case, we'd probably have to upgrade the ring again.
That seems so awkward, though. Especially if the quest and the story and everything is supposed to be done. Anyway, we just got done talking about that. Let's talk about the ability of the ring, though. The ability of the ring is that it has an on-use effect, which gives everyone else wearing that specific ring in your raid a 25% boost to whatever it is they're doing. So, I mean, if it's an Agi ring, then all of the other, hunters and feral druids and Agi shamans who presumably have the same ring get a 25% boost to damage. Healers get a 25% boost to healing. Tanks get a 25% damage reduction, etc., etc.
No, it's just a 2.5% damage reduction. It's a factor of 10 lower than the relative bonus of DPS, which I thought was kind of a strange number. 2.5% damage reduction is a little bit weak, considering that
defensive the tank is only 2.5%?
That's what I read on the graphic that you're referring to. Yeah, 2.5.
Let me see.
Especially for an active ability, and that might just be a typo, and I kind of hope it is.
Well, because the picture that they posted on Twitter, increasing damage dealt by 25%, increasing damage dealt by 25%, healing and absorption. The tank one isn't listed in the picture. In the Mind notes, we have Sanctus, Sigil of the Unbroken, which all Sanctus wearing allies empowered, reducing all damage taken by 25%. I don't see one that says 2.5.
I found a screenshot of the tooltip itself, and that could have very well been just from a tooltip generator and on Wowhead, for instance, and I'm sure it was probably just
hang
typoed
on.
in that case.
There's more of them here. Sanctus... Warrant, reducing damage by 25% for 15 seconds. For the duration of this effect, all damage and healing received are divided evenly among empowered allies. So I don't see a 2.5 on any of these. Anyway, so it gives everyone wearing the ring a 25% buff. And then the tank one, it distributes healing amongst all people that are having the buff. The damage ones, after you are done dealing damage with the buff for your 15 seconds, you explode for 25% of the damage you've dealt. And the healing one, after the effect is over, you unleash a burst of healing that shields all allies for 25% of all the healing you did while you were empowered. So,
which is a ton.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous amount. And that just, like, if you have a full raid that are stacked with these, I imagine you're just going to be able to cheese some effects like they don't even matter.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think it will require group coordination to do that, which is an easy kind of group coordination to do. Not like a healing rotation, not like an interrupt rotation, but ring cooldown rotation will be easier than all of those, I think.
Well,
plus, it's notable to mention that the 3 different styles of DPS rings all buff each other. The healers only buff healer rings, and the tanks only buff tank rings, but the DPS, no matter if you're agility or strength or ranged or melee, will buff all the other DPS rings.
Something else to note is it only happens in a set range, so you can buff all of the melee, and if you're ranged or far enough away, they won't get the buff.
No, I see.
So, like, because in theory, you'd want the melee to be able to use their explosion when they're near the boss. You don't want them to be running away when the effect runs out, and then it explodes, and you waste all the effect. Same with the range. You'd want the range to be able to get up close to a boss to get the explosion, which is within 20 yards. So it's not exactly, super close. You're not giving them a hug, but you do have to get closer.
Than your primary ranged attack, yeah.
Right. So you can essentially stagger these for when they're more effective. Which is, It enables and encourages more coordination within the group than just, okay, everybody pop your ring, let's do it. It may very easy, it'll definitely be something the damage ones you'll want to line up with heroism, but it's still something that you'd be able to effectively use in other ways too, when, range phase, melee phase, depending on the different fights.
Right. But I'm really excited about it, but and also another token of what we just mentioned, this sounds like an epic, or a legendary rather, effect. Kind of like the cloaks had that crazy epic effect. They kind of signify that this was the final form of the item itself. So I don't think that there will be another legendary upgrade after this, because it seems like that would... once the legendary item is done, then you go kill the guy. Right, for the expansion. So I'm thinking something's going to happen.
Well, okay. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because at this point in time we don't have enough information. So we'll just see what happens in the next coming weeks, because they'll give us more. Next thing to note is there's going to be some crafting changes, which are very beautiful changes. We're going to get a tier 5 and tier 6 crafting levels, which before you go, oh my god, I don't want to try and stack up 100 bloods. There's 2 changes that are coming into effect. One is that the tier 5 and tier 6 crafting materials will use a new material called Fellblood, which currently the only place I'm seeing that come from is your barn. I imagine it'll be available from other places, but currently the only thing that they say is through the barn. The other thing to note is that we currently have, Burnished Essence, Greater Burnished Essence, and whatever they're called, all the different tiers of upgrades for the items. Those are all now being condensed into one item, and you can just use that item over and over and over again to go from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, instead of needing the different items.
Right, and not only are they doing that, but they're reducing the material cost of the items, and they're increasing the material gain from your daily profession cooldowns. which I think are big quality of life improvements that I'm not sure they're saying, that they were always really too high. I think what they're saying is we can tune this now that you've been sitting with the old requirements for most of the expansion. And, now, second half of the expansion, let's open up the floodgates a little bit wider for people to level up their alts, especially.
Well, so and the initial limitations of it were just so that we couldn't generate all of our gear through crafting materials. Right. So now that initial burst grind phase is over, they're kind of drawing back the requirements so that we have more catch-up availability, and because it's not as hindering, because there's already so many other places to get gear and people already have it, so they don't need to set the limitations on it anymore.
Right, and I'm picturing in the future they'll be able to come up with a system that's a little bit more efficient from the get-go that will achieve this kind of keeping up with general item level while making leveling alternate characters still accessible, while not needing to make a balance change in the middle of the expansion. Do
you think, at any point in time in the future, the materials that we get from our buildings and our daily cooldowns and stuff, so true steel ingots, hex weave cloth, all of those, do you think we'll ever hit a point in that where those become tradable, where they're not soulbound?
Maybe later on, as they become less important and crafting gear becomes less important. I really don't see why they weren't tradable to begin with, personally. But, that's entirely Blizzard's call. I could see them definitely being tradable once people have higher item levels and it's easier to get that crafted gear. At that point, it'll eventually get to the point where getting a new alt and farming up a whole bunch of true steel bars or whatever, or what have you, is going to be much less of a pain than just trading someone else for it. And at that point, I think Blizzard will probably open up to making those tradable and getting rid of the whole soulbound thing.
All right. So, that's all good news all around, right? Another thing on the notes, lots and lots of class changes are coming up. There's a lot of them, there's a ton of them, and there's a lot of them that are very, very big changes. We're not going to go over any of them here, because guess what? There's always changes to classes. That is something that always happens no matter what, and people get upset, people get excited, some classes get nerfed, some classes get buffed, some classes get destroyed. It's part of Warcraft. If you've played this game for any significant amount of time, even in the past year, you realize that this is something that will continuously happen as the game goes on. If you want to go look at the changes to your class, you are more than welcome to. There's plenty of places to find them. We're not going to go over them because it's really not that relevant. Classes are being changed. Congratulations.
Yeah.
The last thing that is a very big deal for the 6.2 show notes and patch notes and everything is there's now going to be 2 different difficulties available for dungeons. The first one we'll talk about is that dungeons are getting a mythic difficulty. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, pretty much. I never expected this at all. We talked about it and came to the conclusion that why would they do that, kind of. And they've here and done it without any kind of announcement or hinting before that. I mean, I'm blown away.
Well, and they've set the reward from them very, very high. The reward is 690 base with the possibility of them being, Warforged or whatever. They haven't said the title of it, but there'll be 690 base with the ability to come up as item level 700, which that is currently Mythic Blackrock. So that is extremely high.
Well, I think we can also expect the Mythic dungeons to be extremely difficult, so it seems like a reasonable reward for the amount of effort. Of course, we haven't seen how hard they're going to be yet, but I have high hopes. If they can be on the level of difficulty of things like Mythic Highmaul or Mythic Blackrock, that would be very good.
I will be so excited to do these. Just so excited to do these. I love difficult dungeons, just because it's a smaller raid. Normally doesn't take as long, but still gives the same level of satisfaction. And, also, I could use some item levels 690, 700 gear. Sure, why not?
I would not say no to that either. And I'm pretty happy about that too.
How are these things going to be a little bit different from challenge modes, though? Do you guys think?
Well, the main difference is going to be that
no item squishing.
Yeah, no item squishing. So if you really want to, you can just bring in some friends who have really good gear and probably cheese it. The other difference is that unlike challenge modes, they're actually worth doing and have a worthwhile reward, which challenge modes, at least in their current form, really aren't worth doing. The reward, even the daily quest you can get, isn't a good enough reward to get people really going in there.
And challenge modes, besides that terrible piece of gear that you get from the daily quest, the challenge in them is doing them quickly.
Right.
You don't have to do this with a mythic dungeon. With a mythic dungeon, you just have to do it. So, I think that's where the difference comes in.
And you're right about that. And I think that for that reason, challenge modes are always going to be a kind of separate entity. I think there's a small crowd that's extremely dedicated to challenge modes and really like chasing those top server times and things like that. I don't think that they're so unsuccessful that people are just trying to redo challenge modes and say, this is what we actually wanted to do when we did challenge modes, and challenge mode didn't work, so we're going to just do mythic dungeons instead. That would upset too many people, I think.
Right.
This holds at least, it needs to hold as different a niche as possible, but I'm not entirely sure how they're going to kind of invoke that.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say because they will continuously because now that they're doing this, like challenge mode dungeons, we weren't sure if they were going to be continued on into Warlords, and now that they are, they've set the expectation that that's going to be in the next expansion. So I think the same thing is going to happen with Mythic. If this is just more content that is available for you to do if you so choose, we're hitting this point now. Thank you, Blizzard. We are hitting this point now of that. If you hit a point where you're like, I don't have anything to do in the game, you are wrong. Because it's not like, I don't like PvP and I've already done the raid. I'm out of stuff to do. That is completely false at this point because there's going to be so much more that they're continuously just building and pushing on for you to go do. Because that's one of the complaints that they've been getting is, oh man, Blizzard, there's nothing to do. You're not giving us enough stuff to do. Well, it's like, okay, here you go. Now you have 4 different difficulties of raids, 4 different difficulties of dungeons, and you'll also have the next thing of that we're going to talk about, time walking dungeons. I am so excited. If you can see me right now, my arms are literally flailing around in the air. They're also going to be making time walking a thing. We just talked about this like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I remember my own theories and opinions being a little bit too clearly. I'm feeling a little bit embarrassed because they did a couple of things that I kind of dismissed as not being anything that they would do.
I would just like to say that we did it, guys. It's because we talked about it, right? They decided that they had to do it, so they threw it in the patch notes. No?
Seems like a reasonable estimation of the situation.
Maybe
we're not
not.
going to do the thing they suggested, but we're going to do it our way and just call it the same thing.
It is kind of... I think this is very much... You can see Blizzard is really pushing on... They're just testing the waters on this. This is very much just like, dipping a toe into the pool to see, is this, is it going to burn me? Is it going to freeze me? So what they're doing with this is that the rewards currently are kind of lame, in my opinion. The gear is going to be upgraded, which I did not see coming. We'd kind of said that this was going to be the worst option for them to do because it just made it too difficult, but apparently Blizzard said, we'll do what we want. Because the option they're going with is that the gear that drops from it will be upgraded to item level 640, which seems really low to me. But I mean, I guess they want this to be openly accessible. That just seems really low. I mean, that's LFR level from Highmaul, which is, like, let's face it, that's like, it's really low. And from what I can tell, there's no other rewards, and they're only going to be available during special 3-day-long holiday weekend events. So Friday to Sunday on specific weekends is the only time you're going to be able to do these, and there's only going to be certain dungeons available during those weekends.
Right. I think that they're going to tie this in with the Bronze Dragonflight and have them be a kind of faction that's going to be doing this storyline where they're saying, you know, all this stuff is happening and we need you guys to come in and fix the timeline here at the, you know, Black Morass again, which is kind of funny because I believe that is on the list. And,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and have it be like kind of like a world event kind of thing. And I thought the first time I read it that they're going to line it up with the holiday events that already exist, like Valentine's Day kind of thing, you know, which would be a little bit too weird. But no, this weekend where you can see the Bronze Dragonflight everywhere and they're going out like town criers and saying, you know, come help us, help us, help us, and kind of motivating us as a force. And I'm wondering if that's going to tie into the end of the expansion at all. I'm going to think not, because it's a little bit too unrelated for them to be introducing these new factions, especially if they want to persist the system past this expansion, if that makes any sense.
The other thing that's really interesting about this is that you don't have to be level 100 to do them. Currently, there's going to be, 5 Burning Crusade and 5 Wrath of the Lich King dungeons that are currently set up for the Time Walker system. Burning Crusade, we have the Arcatraz, Black Morass, Mana Tombs, Shattered Halls, and Slave Pens. And you only need to be level 71 or higher to do these. So what they're doing is, instead of raising the dungeon up, they are going with that system of lowering us down. So you're going to be taken from level 100 and your power level is going to be smushed all the way down to where it should be for doing a level 70 heroic dungeon. Because they're not changing much with the tuning or anything. The thing that they're tuning is us. So they're smushing us way down to be essentially like fresh quest greens and a few dungeon blues to the point where you're moving into heroic dungeons at level 70. And so they can do this with anyone that's above level 70. So, you know, maybe that means you'll be, if there's a way to dungeon queue into this, maybe that means that you're going to be getting queued up with, you know, level 77s. And they said that was an okay system for them, because even though it'll limit some classes, my favorite is always like Boomkins and Shadow Priest, you know, they need the haste for the dots and stuff. They said that you're going to be supplementing that with your level 100 abilities in a dungeon that was never designed to handle those. What do you guys think? Is that an acceptable way to handle it?
Well, I wonder whether they are going to have the abilities of Shadow Priest and Moonkin specifically in your example scaled such that they benefit more proportionally from lower values of the bonus stats we have.
Well, they've already kind of pushed towards that. I mean, every class obviously has this, stat that they want more than any other. But they've really kind of tried to change it to where you aren't completely reliant on that. So with the
there are no more overtime thresholds. For
there's no more
haste,
stat
so
breaks.
You get the extra dot. I think it's a little bit more of a continuously variable system. So a little bit less helps you a little bit less. A little bit more helps you a little more. But there's no ceiling. Milestones kind of thing. So I think if they're not throwing everybody's kind of haste build out of proportion by making them miss all of their optimized extra ticks, then I think you could scale it down as much as you want, and proportionally you'll still be stronger if you stack haste than if you stack crit, and you'll be proportionally stronger than the base stats on your gear, for example.
Right. And I think that's very true. And they've already pushed forward a lot of the classes to innately have a good hunk of the stat that they need. So, Fire Mages, they couldn't exist if they didn't have crit. Well, Fire Mages now, automatically get, 20% crit or some ridiculous amount. So, it's like, this is what you need to function properly. Well, now you have it. If you get more, good for you. But you don't have to have it anymore because you just innately get it. One thing that I would like to note on here is the only item we've currently seen. They're called time-twisted items, and the only one we've seen is from Utgard Pinnacle, from King Ymuron, the dude at the end. his Red Sword of Courage is at the end. It's the only item we've seen, and it's item level 640. But I do not see a required level to use it. So in theory, this might mean you could get a 640 item level weapon at level 71, which is going to essentially be one of the most useful things forever until you hit level 100.
Well, what they said in their original explanation of how Time Walker was going to work is that it would scale up to an appropriate item level or player level. So I think if you're level 100, you get item 640. But if you were, level 81 and you got this thing from Woodguard Keep, it would just be fairly similar to its original version.
Yeah, it says it would give you a reward commensurate with your item level, not with your, not regardless of, character level or anything.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. It scales you down to the level of the dungeon. It scales the reward up to your character level when you do the dungeon. So I think it'll also be frozen kind of in time. So if you get it at level 75 and it's a level 75 weapon, it's not going to keep leveling up with you like an heirloom. That would be silly. That would make heirlooms kind of irrelevant except for the XP gain.
Which weapons don't have on them anyway. So my question is, though, okay, I see what you're saying now. It will scale to an item level appropriate for use at your level. So
correct.
Does that mean just at level 100 everything gets item level 640? Because that's fairly irrelevant. It'll make if it only gives you item level 640 and it doesn't take into effect your current item level or anything like that, then there won't be a whole lot of reason to do it still for people that already have a 645 weapon from their garrison missions.
Well, they can't necessarily scale it to your item level at level 100 and not do the same thing at level 75, because when you're level 75, you might still have that level 35 necklace you got from a dungeon group satchel, especially if you're a tank or a healer just running dungeons almost constantly. And if it took my average item level into account, it might give me something that's more like appropriate for 65, just because of all the kind of crap gear I have. If that makes any sense.
Right. I don't know. This is weird. Like, I wish they would have done something else with the reward system, because that was one of the things that we talked about at length, was the reward system that would be attached to Time Walker. And unfortunately, I think this is just one of the weakest ways to encourage people to do Time Walker, because it's going to be such a cool system, but we want it to still be relevant, We still want to actually get something that we can enjoy out of this.
Yeah, it's a completely useless reward system. Since it's item level 640, I mean, there's no difference between me doing a Time Walker dungeon and me just going to the original dungeon, getting that item, and transmogging whatever level 640 item I have to look like that. Functionally, there's absolutely no difference. So, realistically, there's no reward. It's just, if you want to do Time Walker, if you think it would be fun, you can go ahead and do it. I think that's what Blizzard's going for right now. I think right now they're more just trying to gauge how many people actually want to do this and how many people will do it, rather than coming up with a final solution for how they're going to handle rewards.
That might be right, too. Also, consider they're not releasing all of the dungeons at once. They're going to gate them to these specific weekends, so we'll be able to chomp on a few for a couple days, and then we have to wait. And I think that's a good idea, because we would have been completely overwhelmed if they said, here's Time Walker, go do any dungeon. And we have this reward system. I think people are looking for a little bit more of a restricted theme park-style experience.
Sure. And this is very much them testing. I didn't say, but the Wrath of the Lich King dungeons that you'll be able to do are Ankahet, the Old Kingdom, Gundrak, Halls of Lightning, the Nexus, and Utgard Pinnacle. So with that, with this limitation that we have, they're testing it, like you said, to see if we want to do it, but I worry that if the initial reward is too small, they won't get enough feedback from it and will drop support, because I'd really like to see this continually be a thing, but the reward has to be there.
Now, think about it this way. Oh, go ahead, Florian. Go ahead with your point.
I can agree with you on that, and that's a very real problem, is the fact that 640 item level reward, no one's going to want. Like, I might do one on the very first weekend, and then I'll be like, okay, that was kind of amusing, and then I'll do one again. Because the simple fact is, while we do want Time Walker dungeons, and we do want to really relive those old dungeons and those old times, the simple fact is, WoW is very much a game about having a series of numbers attached to your characters and making those numbers bigger. In this case, that number being item level. And if we're not doing something that increases our item level, that's an inefficient use of our playtime, and that's going to discourage us from doing those dungeons, even if, from a purely gameplay standpoint, we actually do want to do them.
Right. And, I mean, I don't go back and do... Well, that's not true. I do go back and do Utgard Pinnacle, but that's because there's a mount that drops in there, and that's, it's an entirely different story, but I don't ever go back and do Halls of Lightning. There's no reason for me to. I have zero cause to ever go back and do it, unless I have something that I want from Transmog, but unless these items give different colors, which the only one that we currently have reference is the Red Sword of Courage, it's not a different color.
Right.
It's exactly the same, so I have zero reason currently.
Let me ask.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask this question. Do you guys think we'll be able to join these Time Walker dungeons with characters of different level?
What do you mean? Like,
you go to Utgard Pinnacle, I'm level 100, my buddy's leveling up a character, he's level 82.
Yes.
And a friend of mine's at 90. We'll form a group, and then we'll all be reduced to the same level, and we'll be able to do them at the same difficulty together, correct?
Well, you're not reduced to the same level. You're reduced to the same power level, because they're not going to take levels away, because they don't want you to be stripped of your abilities.
Right.
Because that's very disorienting. It'd be like, well, my level 90 talent is whatever, and if I don't have it, that completely blows over my entire...
And my UI has holes in it, this and that. Yeah, I understand that, but... If you can join a group with people of any level, then there's also experience gained question. Do you get experience doing this at a lower level?
I would hope so.
Can you use this to help your friends level up? Are there other kind of incentives for doing it, even if the reward at endgame is kind of irrelevant? Socially.
Maybe. I don't know. But, I mean, it goes into that thing of, like... Why would you bother doing it? Like, it probably doesn't give any more experience than just doing a normal dungeon, so why would you bother with it if you're just looking for experience?
Right. Yeah, good point. But it is a testing ground for reducing power level to people to a specific, state. I realize they're probably doing something under the hood in the dungeon itself to make it receptive to that change. I don't think they're just using the heroic dungeon, or else I don't know why they wouldn't release more of them.
No, I'm fairly certain that they said they're just using the heroic dungeon, because somebody asked if they'd be adding more abilities to them.
Right.
And they said no.
They said they weren't changing any of the numbers, basically.
Yeah, 2 of those events will be time-walking weekends in which you'll be able to queue up for a randomly selected old-school dungeon with a new sort of heroic difficulty. Your character's power and gear has been scaled down to a fraction of what they normally are. For the first time in years, some dungeons you outgrew long ago will once more put your skills to the test. A good challenge deserves a good reward, so to go along with scaling you down, we're going through most every piece of loot in the dungeon and scaling it up. When you time walk through Utgard Pinnacle, take down Kamer Ymiron and loot his item level 640 Red Sword of Courage. It will scale up to an item level appropriate for use at your level. That is all it says.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, I don't know. If all it gives is 640 item level, unfortunately, as much as I want this system to be, I'm not interested in it, because I have, like we already stated, I have no reason to do it.
What about as an alt catch-up mechanic?
It'd be a really unreliable mechanic if it only happened on special weekends. I mean, and 640 item level is still really low. I mean...
Yeah, that's true.
That's not enough of a catch-up. I mean, my missions already give me 645.
That's true, but the simple fact is that when this comes out, Hellfire Citadel will also be coming out, which means we'll have Hellfire Citadel LFR probably shortly behind it. And what gear is that going to drop? Probably 650, maybe 670 maybe?
Comes... Yeah,
655 is in Blackrock, so 670 gear. If you can get 670 in LFR, what's the point in waiting to the weekend for a 640 gear?
Probably just to meet the item level requirement itself for getting in there. Unless you want to just step up through LFR from dungeon to dungeon, which in Siege of Orgrimmar patch was kind of a chore. Basically, the fast track was to just get all the timeless gear you could and then go to TOT for, a run or two, or maybe straight to Siege of Orgrimmar if you're lucky with burdens. And I'm thinking that being able to love your character, get him to 100, wait for a holiday weekend. Maybe it's going to be every weekend or at least twice a month. Maybe if it's that high in frequency, grind out all the 640 pieces you can from those dungeons, which might be a significant number. Maybe like even, 5 or 6 pieces per dungeon. They might release more than one at a time during the weekend event. That would be preferable to doing high mall LFR and trying to get lucky with drops there where you can only loot the bosses once a week.
Maybe? I don't know. I just don't see it being that relevant. Because as soon as you're able to do Blackrock LFR, all of this gear becomes completely irrelevant.
Right.
And I would also like to point out that I have done 0 Blackrock LFR and have killed 1 boss in Blackrock Foundry on normal, and I have item level 663.
Right.
That's another good point, is even if it was intended as an alt catch-up mechanic, it doesn't really matter now, because in this expansion, gear is pretty much raining from the sky.
It is.
You get gear for things that have absolutely nothing to do with actually playing the game. Things like your garrison missions, or wait, what else do you do for gear? I'm having a brain fart.
What else do you do for gear? I don't know. I just do garrison missions.
You can buy,
that's exactly
buy BOEs in the auction house. Some more available than ever.
Every 2 weeks, you basically get a free handout piece of gear, even if you don't do anything from your raid mission. Plus, you get other missions that will give you gear. So, right now, I think if anything, it's too easy to gear up an alt if you're willing to go through the trouble of doing the whole garrison follower thing.
Well, and there's also easy to smash down world bosses. You can do the garrison invasions and the Apexis dailies, all of which give very decent gear if you're willing to put any effort into them at all. You can summon the world bosses to your garrisons now, which also give gear. You have the weekly quest from... Ours is Muradin. I don't know who the Horde get. But it's like, go kill Brackenspore, which you can do in LFR, which gives you a 645 or a 655 piece of gear, right, which is automatically higher than this Time Walker thing. So, I mean, all of this, every single thing that gives you gear besides heroic dungeons gives better gear than what this Time Walker system will be giving.
Even the heroic dungeons are pretty close. It's, 630 gear? 636 if it's Warforged.
Yeah, which is borderline the same.
And you can do those heroic dungeons as much as you want. The heroic dungeons are not a weekend event. They can just spam those a bunch, have a guy geared up in a day or two. So, really, the Time Walker, it's going to need a better reward if they want it to be successful.
I don't know. But let's not beat it too much, alright, guys? We got one more thing to do in the news, and we've already been here for over an hour.
Aid me! Something you're doing? Grant me your strength. No time for play. Me busy. Leave me alone. Animality. Me not that kind of orc. Sweet. Ha! No! I will wield your strength.
I don't know if you muted or not, Evan, or if you just managed to finally not laugh after 4 weeks of it. Anyway, this is the final day of the giveaway for the Iron Skyreaver mount. The giveaway actually ended as of midnight last night. We received a sizable number of entries, which made me super happy. The winner is David C. I'm not going to give out any of his information on this show, obviously, but he has been emailed, and congratulations to him. If he, for some reason, does not get back to us within, what do you guys think, 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
If he doesn't get back to us in 2 weeks, I still have all of the entries. I'll just pick a new winner, and then we'll go on from there. Hopefully we're able to get a hold of them, so congratulations, David. And we'll be getting that out to him as soon as possible. So yeah, I love doing giveaways. Look forward to many more in the future. I don't have any to announce currently, but congratulations and thank you all for participating. Alright, let's go into a closer look. Welcome everybody to A Closer Look. It's a small segment we do in which we take a closer look at something within the World of Warcraft, give it a little bit more thought and consideration. It is not necessarily always something that has to do with the news. In fact, it very rarely has to do with the news, unless it's this week. And we're going to be talking about patches. Now, we're not going to be talking about patch notes, but we're going to be talking about patches themselves. So the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between an expansion versus a patch. So, Florian, would you give us a little bit more information on the difference between the two? Florian?
Oh, sorry about that. The main difference between the two is in the difference between the size of the content as well as the mechanism of delivery. The expansions are generally really big, add a whole bunch of new content in one go, and whereas the patches are smaller, little bits of content. And also the difference in delivery is that you have to buy the expansion. It does not come free, whereas the patch comes to every subscriber who is playing the game, which makes them slightly different in terms of what you get and how you get it. But at the end of the day, it's still content delivery.
And so, like, for instance, 6.0 was Warlords of Draenor, and then you have, like, 6.0.2, which is, like, a mega little hotfix patch, and then we have 6.1, 6.2, which we just got done talking about, which are the big content patches, which are the free, upgrades like raids and new zones and stuff like we just got done yapping about for an hour. And these are the two differences between that Florian was illustrating. So now we'll go into the system, and we have the long supported system has been, release the complete expansion, and then, you keep following up with these smaller, I like to think of them as supplements. And every game kind of does this differently. Some of them copy Warcraft. We've all played different MMOs, at least everyone on the show has. So the thing that I want to talk about is which is better. Assuming that Blizzard wants to do this thing of where they release more expansions with, just quicker. So where do we actually want to sit in terms of what makes us happy for delivery of our content? So, like, for instance, what would you guys think if we got more expansions, but less patches? Which is currently what they're pushing for. Instead of going to 6.3, 6.4, we might just do 6.2, boom, next expansion.
I think it's good as long as the wait isn't way too long between the content releases themselves. And I also like it where it's not too short. Fortunately, we haven't had an example yet of an expansion that I thought came too soon.
Yeah, they're always too long right now.
Right. I think it's important that we have some time to enjoy the expansion at endgame, and after a certain sense of kind of, gentle routine has kind of settled a little bit, especially for your community, all the other players. You reach a certain level of familiarity and comfort with your faction hubs, with the state of PvP, trade relations, and with your guilds too. I think expansions can be pretty disruptive to guilds because a lot of times it forces us to kind of pick a direction where you didn't have to really make a choice in the past. And with the level cap increase, it really kind of shifts our focus to maybe some of our other characters or our alts, or maybe want to change mains with a new expansion going into a new landmass and everything too. So I like how they haven't come too quickly. I feel like I get the time to sit and enjoy myself for a while after the initial excitement and rush of the new expansion is worn off. But I think they could come a little bit more frequently than the expansions have come in the past, especially after Pandaria. Okay.
So now, Florian, how would you feel if we had less expansions and more or larger patches? So, like, let's consider 6.2 to be a very, very large patch, because in terms of things, it's a very, very sizable patch. So, if we had, let's say we moved to a time where we had, like, an expansion, like, every, 3 years, which is, right now they're sitting at every 2, they're wanting to shorten that down to 1, but every 3 years an expansion, but every 4 months we get another patch the size of 6.2. So, we'd be going on to 6.3, 4, 6.5, 6.6 even, which we've never went that high. I don't think we've ever went higher than 0.4 in any of the expansions. How would you feel if we just kept building beyond that point, if they were all nice, big, full, meaty contents like that?
That would be all right, because once again, the main goal is just to get content into the hands of the players, so it doesn't matter if you do it through patches or expansions. My main concern then would be that usually Blizzard uses expansions as an opportunity to make big changes to the game. Like if they need to make changes to the game's core engine, or if they need to make big gameplay mechanics changes or changes to classes, they'll do that during expansions. If we have expansions less often, then things like class balance could become more out of control, or balance issues and gameplay and technical issues could be left hanging for longer because they'll be waiting until the next expansion to fix it rather than doing it in a patch. So it could be somewhat more annoying to players in that sense. Either way, at the end of the day, I think it would be a similar amount of content. It would just take longer for Blizzard to make big upgrades to the game.
I don't know. A lot is changing here in 6.2 in terms of class balance. I mean, they're really breaking out the nerf hammer on some things and the upgrade wrench on others. So I don't know if that's entirely true. I mean, the coding thing, definitely. I mean, Warlords of Draenor brought us a new code for them to do hotfixes and stuff with, which, from what I can tell, it's worked fantastic. The game seems to be perfectly fine. But class changes and stuff, they're happy to do those during just regular content patches.
That's true, but I'm not talking so much about, for example, what we're doing right now is, in 6.2, is just tweaking numbers. Numbers are going up, numbers are going down. When I say changing classes, I mean things like adding or removing spells, changing the way rotations work, changing fundamental mechanics or resource systems, things like that. Like fundamental changes to the gameplay, not just nerfing something a little bit.
Okay. So, I want to run this concept by you. So, anytime they change anything like that, so in theory, there is probably a still number of players out there that own Mists of Pandaria and not Warlords of Draenor and are still playing the game. Their numbers might not be very big, but I'm sure they exist. I'm sure they're out there. That's as high as they don't have the money to buy Warlords right now, but they still want to play and they can afford the $15 expansion, the $15 sub, or maybe they're supplying their money with the WoW tokens now. How would you guys feel if we move to a system, because those people, they still get all of the tuning and balance changes. They aren't locked in the past. Anything that changes with their class affects them. What if we hit a system where what if 6.2 was going to cost you $5? And then 6.3, $5. And then 7.0, $10. 7.1, $5. And they take away this system of the free patch no longer exists. The price of the expansion is broken up across its patches, and it's just not because some people, I know a lot of people that just can't afford the $50 drop on an expansion because sure, times are hard, money is tight. So if instead, I don't want to call it nickel and diming because it's not. Instead of charging you in hunks, they're charging you in pieces. So, and if you don't get 6.2, you obviously can't go do the 6.2 stuff, but you get all of the changes and stuff that came with it. So it still keeps you in the current, and you could still do a lot of the stuff that is currently available, but the new stuff you don't get access to. And this could, in theory, in my brain, save Blizzard money, because if they did it this way and did a purely online system like this, they would no longer have to do discs. Because if you do everything in these small patches like this, if you can't buy a disc with 6.2 on it, so no matter what, you have to download that. So if they do patches in bigger chunks and just charge money for those, then they could, in theory, save money by not having to release an expansion box, disc, set, etc. What do you guys think of this system that I just proposed?
I think it could do that, but I see one glaring flaw with that system to begin with. And that problem is, like, for example, let's say they had done that for Warlords of Draenor, right? I bought 6.0. I didn't want to buy 6.1 or 6.2. And I want to go raid Mythic Highmaul. Well, let's say Hellfire Citadel has just come out. So there's like 700 plus gear that I can just buy on the auction house and then go in and crush the entire thing because it's way lower level than all of the gear that I have available. Because while my content might be easier or lower level, since I'm interacting with other players, I can still get much stronger gear and stuff like that. And that's going to essentially break the game gameplay-wise, which I don't think is good for everybody. I think that's why they tend to keep expansions together.
Maybe?
Making any sense?
Kind of?
Yeah, definitely. That is a good point. And I mean, I've got a couple of other issues, but they're more kind of like people really like buying the collector's edition, so I don't think they'd make a collector's edition patch 6.2. And the other thing is level gating, like the level cap adjustments that happen in expansions are a pretty huge feature. And I can't imagine like patch 6.2 coming with lets you scale up to 102. I'll give you a 2-level cap adjustment.
I can see it no problem. It raising us up to like 105 and you get those 5 levels through Tanan Jungle, especially if Tanan Jungle is a hardy zone. Sure, I can see it, no problem. I mean, because you're able to level like 3 levels in just your starting zone.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it would just seem a little bit strange if the entire continent was kind of gated in that same way. It's almost like if you wanted to just enjoy being max level somewhere, you'd have to kind of stop at level 90 and just enjoy Pandaria rather than buy levels 91 and 2 and then have access to 10% of Draenor, and the only content you have access to is Frostfire Ridge or Shadowmoon Valley.
Well, it wouldn't be that cut up. It would, like, if there was a max level, like, essentially the expansion for Warlords of Draenor and the beginning of it would be, like $10 instead of the $5, and that would give you the bigger jump and everything like that comes with the initial release, and then the patches after that would be the $5. It was just an idea that I just threw out there.
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't think any of the other MMOs do anything like that. That's pretty creative to come up with, I guess. And I can kind of see that system being in use in other games, but it seems a little bit outside the nature of anything Blizzard would ever think of doing. So I'm not sure what kind of feedback to give on that, except that it just doesn't seem all that likely that they ever would, but it's hard to put my finger on exactly why.
Sure.
Because you're right in saying that it's like it would make the game more accessible to people who weren't able to afford a large chunk of money, or it might reduce the burden of entry to somebody who wanted to try out Draenor and didn't want to shell out $40 or $50 or $60 if they're gaming it from the ground up, I guess, just to play the game at max level.
Mm-hmm. So, my next question, though, is, are we happy with the current system that we get our content through? Assuming that everything came out on time and all of that, would this be an acceptable way for them to do things? Or does it need to change? I mean, this system hasn't changed in 10 years.
Well, I don't really have a problem with the content delivery system. The main issue, once again, is when things are massively delayed and we have the same raid for a year or 14 months or something like that. Aside from those hiccups, I think they generally do a pretty good job of keeping a steady stream of content.
Yeah, I think Florian's right there, but there is a lot of player dissatisfaction with having an expectation that a patch is going to, like, all patches are going to be kind of equal in the amount of content they provide and the amount of balance adjustments they provide and new features and things like that. And then Blizzard under-delivers according to the, customer base expectation.
6.1 was an under-delivery.
Right, considering 6.0 and 5.4 and 5.3 were all pretty big ones to kind of compare it to. Yeah, it's true.
6.1 essentially didn't give us anything. Like, there was nothing really that came along with 6.1. And I say that because they explicitly said that Hellfire Citadel was not part of 6.1. It was its own thing altogether.
Right.
So it doesn't get to count as the patch. Like, I mean, sure, it was a raid. It came out very, very close to 6.1, but it was not part of 6.1.
Right. Because they had that one ready to roll out, and they did want a 6.1 delay to delay the raid schedule.
Right. So, is it just a matter of Blizzard needing to keep a little bit stronger on delivering true content rather than just sad little niblets?
Well, the question I might ask is that would 6.1 have been more satisfying if it included the top half of Gorgorond, including, too many acronyms.
You mean the Iron Dogs that we never got and apparently have just been shoved to the side and forgotten?
Yes, something like that. If patch 6.1 included the Iron Dogs 5-man and the Train 5-man and the Raid and a portion of Gorgorond that was relevant to those things, would that have been a more satisfying patch if it meant that we didn't have access to those things from release?
Yes. But that's too few dungeons at release.
Yeah, and that's just a kind of a catch-22.
But, I mean, I already thought that they had too few dungeons at release anyway. They've been progressively getting lower and lower on the number of dungeons that they give us at expansion launch, and it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting any more, which I actually enjoyed that system that they did in Cataclysm, and Wrath of the Lich King. And,
right.
When Ice Crown came out, well, when we were working on getting Ice Crown, the Ice Crown dungeons came out, and then like in Cataclysm, we got the End Time dungeons, like Well of Eternity and End Time and whatever. There's one more in there whose name escapes me.
Right. The only thing it would mess up is challenge mode ranks and rewards. You start the game and you need to get gold in these 8 dungeons, and then there are 3 more that pop out on top of it, but they're not real dungeons because there's no challenge mode for them. Kind of thing. I don't think that would be too hard a problem to work around. Just have a separate kind of ladder for them, or a separate season that resets all the rankings, and just have everybody kind of start again from scratch. But that would be kind of frustrating for its own reasons. And releasing all of the expansions 5-man at the beginning is kind of a sound decision, especially if you're going to have 4 difficulties for them that you're going to only be able to access through going outside and doing the raids and getting the better gear and then coming back, or doing the elite crafting and then getting the gear and then coming back.
Right. I don't know, it's hard to say. I just... I know that there's a lot of people who are unhappy with a lot of the way that Blizzard does things, and I'm not saying that I'm unhappy. I'm just questioning of what would be a system that we could alter things to be happy.
To please everybody.
I don't think that's possible, but Blizzard could easily please more people than they currently are.
So you think each patch being kind of have a sense of occasion about it and be satisfying, and then push all these balance changes and like the new lighting system into something that's not a patch, or at least it would have been 6.0.3, not 6.1.
Wait, what?
Which is just nomenclature. Instead of releasing patch 6.1 as 6.1, make it 6.03, because 6.02 was launch day. Or no, that was the preparatory patch. And I don't know if there was a separate launch day pass, if there's ever a 6.03 or 6.04 before 6.0 or before 6.1.
That would have made more sense to me in general with the size of that patch. I don't think it should have been a 0.1 patch at all. Not with what's the word I'm looking for? The expectation that they've set with .x patches.
Right, exactly. That's just a nomenclature problem then, which is easily fixable. I mean, you're misleading your players by your argument, I imagine, into thinking it's going to be a significant content patch and it delivers no content. Well, then it shouldn't have a content patch, number.
But then we go into the problem of that there would have been a too large of delay between content.
Yeah, and there it is.
What were you about to say, Florian?
Well, I was going to agree with that, but another one of the issues also is that Blizzard consistently promises things in content packages and doesn't deliver them. Most recently being the Iron Docks, which was supposed to be in 6.1. I guess now it's not even going to be in 6.2, and who knows if it'll ever happen. Things like the Iron Docks. What else did we have? We had some raids in Northrend that never happened. We had the Dance Studio, which I'm still waiting for.
Really?
And
I'm not.
You know, it would probably help if they didn't say, we're going to give you all these things in the next patch/expansion and then not give them to people. That's kind of,
right.
You know...
All your dreams will come true. JK.
Exactly. Like, you know, I know it's their job to hype up their patches because you have to do that in the video game business. It's just how it works. But it'd be better if they could either restrain themselves a little bit more or just make 100% sure that the stuff can be ready to go on time. Because there's nothing that disappoints me more than thinking I'm going to get some really awesome content and then it just doesn't happen. That's a terrible feeling.
Well, my question is, on that, where, like, presumably with Iron Docks, you know, they said that this was going to be a new zone and stuff like that, and now it apparently just doesn't exist unless it's being moved into Nan Jungle somehow, which I could see with the way that the shipyards and stuff are going. My question is, though, what happens to that? I mean, do they just write all of that off as lost work? I mean, like with the Abyssal Maw, is that what it's called? The Abyssal Maw?
Right.
The water raid that was supposed to be alongside
Firelands.
Firelands, thank you. There's videos and stuff of what that was supposed to be. Is that just a write-off now? Do they just write that off as just something that they don't... It's like, well, that's just scrap.
Karazhan Crypts.
That's actually in the game.
Yeah, it's literally in the game, but it was never dealt with, which is an even bigger write-off.
Like, and that's what I question. Like, is it just a write-off? Like, why don't they finish these and give us even more content? Is it like, I know Blizzard has pretty high standards, so maybe it's like it would be a subpar thing for what they consider that they should be delivering. Maybe, but I don't know. I just feel like they just abandon so much all the time. Whereas if they would put a little bit more care into their patches and how they bring them to us and present them to us, that there might be so much more content in this game than there already is.
Right, and this kind of reminds me of a dev interview that I read, I think shortly before release, if I remember correctly. It was talking about how the departments are divided and how the people who build the maps and the terrain and all the kind of visual details aren't exactly, tightly linked in correspondence to the quest and gameplay designers. So if I'm a quest writer and Michael is designing terrain, he's going to, make Castbar and look nice and populate it with people, I guess. And he's going to make all those swamps and jungles around Shadowmoon Valley. He's going to put little details like a little cave or a lost satchel or something in the terrain, and there are a lot of these little kind of just flavor details, like kind of funny things that we see just walking around. And it's my choice as a quest designer to go in and say, here's 5 possible vignettes that we could write for these 5 little details, and we're going to pick 3 of them. And I think they use that word which is kind of like just a tangential departure from what you're really working on to help, this NPC get their NPC dog from the burning NPC house. It's just like a little bit of a detour, and the quest people are going to take cues from the environmental people in developing these. So I think there's a lot of kind of lost threads that haven't been tied up, that one part of Blizzard put there, the other part tried to make something work and maybe couldn't, or development time got short and they just had to finish what they got. So I think it'd be really cool to read about a whole lot of these hidden vignettes that never got finished, and I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of them. So when you talk about lost content, I feel like there are a lot of little tiny pieces of lost content. And I think there are some pretty big chunks of lost content that required a whole lot of developmental time, but never kind of came to fruition.
That makes me sad. All right, let's go into the mailbag.
Come on.
Welcome to the mailbag, everybody. You can email us your questions, content, and feedback, and oh god, I'm okay. Our email is thecastbar@gmail.com. You can send us a tweet on our Twitter, which is @CastbarPodcast, or call and leave a voicemail at 508-738-2278. We have a piece of mail here. It says, "Hey guys, another great show. I always liked doing the Nexus when it popped and dreaded when its counterpart, the Oculus, came up. Good times. My question is about the tank healer DPS triad. The only experience I have in MMO is WoW, so I don't know if any other games present a viable alternative. Do you have any thoughts or experiences with other games that may do it differently? Do you think WoW will ever change directions, or even should they? Take care and thanks for doing the show. Taikuta." So, we have mentioned, we've all played other MMOs in the past, and the tank healer DPS thing is something that is kind of like the standard go-to, and I'll say right now, I don't think WoW can ever change. This system, the way that the gameplay is set, like, the only way that WoW would ever change from the system they have is if they change to an entirely new game. So, there's that. Just because the way that everything plays out, the numbers, the system, the abilities, I don't think it's possible to change. Do you guys think that there'd be a way to alter the template fabric that WoW uses to hold itself together?
No possible way. The only way they could do it right now would be... sorry. The only way they could do it right now is if they dismantled the entire combat system and redesigned encounters, all of the encounters from the ground up. Everything has been built around the tank, DPS, healer, Holy Trinity from the ground up.
That is not happening.
Yeah, I really don't see any way, short of just rebuilding the entire combat mechanics, that they could possibly do that. And now for my counterpoint.
Evan, what were you about to say that just made you so sad?
I expected Florian to disagree with you initially. You defied my expectations there, because we have a really good example of this system already in place, and that's PvP. No, yeah, scenarios. I was joking about PvP. I think we're talking about PvE strictly because I like arena compositions and things. There are some holy triads or trinities, but tank healer DPS isn't necessarily the metagame there. Yeah, PvE content scenarios were a departure from this instanced PvE, 5-man or 10, 20-man tank healer DPS, spree. The scenarios gave you the option to heal outside of having a healer. They varied the damage such that it wasn't all coming in super huge melee swings. And I think it made it really viable for a 3 DPS team to do it just as easily as a tank healer DPS team.
That was small content, though. Like, I don't ever see a way to do a raid and it be effective enough with nothing but DPS.
Right. Because of the way encounters are designed now. And I agree with Florian saying that you're never going to go backwards and change all these things. Well, I mean, actually coming out of my mouth, that hearing it out loud, I wouldn't want to say they'll never go back and revamp old encounters in order to fit some kind of new template. But I can't imagine them creating new encounters that were not reliant on the template itself.
That being said, those scenarios didn't carry over into Warlords.
Correct. They did not. And
which I'm actually kind of sad about, by the way.
I know I didn't really enjoy doing them, mostly because I couldn't auto look for a group for Heroic 3-man.
Yeah,
you had to form one in the chat, which was a little bit clunky, and I'm not sure exactly what the point of that was. But at any rate, the scenarios themselves were just a little bit dumb sometimes, and they were slow, and sometimes they were... Yeah, I mean, sometimes I want to say they're a little bit too hard, but I think I only ever did it trying to gear up low item level alts, so that might be an artificial result of that.
Okay.
But I don't know exactly why players rejected them kind of wholeheartedly if there were other strong reasons.
I don't know. I mean, there are other games that don't have the tank healer DPS thing. What is the one where you play a superhero? is it called City of Heroes, or is it like DC Heroes Online or something?
It used to be called City of Heroes. I know which one you're talking about there.
That one, you didn't have tanks, healers, and DPS. You just played your class, and the raids were like crazy, lots and like a lot of stuff was just like naturally dodgeable. So it was a lot more on you as a person. You needed to dodge things in order to survive. Lots of jumping around and flying and craziness, and it honestly didn't work very well.
Right.
Terra can kind of pull this off again because almost there isn't anything that is a targeted ability. Almost everything can be dodged in some way. So there are some, like essentially like rogue evasion tanking is something you can actually do in there, where you just have to move around a lot and keep avoiding bosses' attacks. So you could, in theory, do this without a tank or a healer if you just had people that were skilled enough at dodging abilities. But for the most part, I mean, that system is in place so that everyone has a job and it doesn't just feel like a crazy mosh pit that there just happens to be one big monster involved.
Right.
And I don't know if there's a way to do it differently or if there's even a reason to do it differently. I mean, the games that I've mentioned all have drastically different playstyles with the same underlying mechanic of tank, healer, DPS. Just the way that you do that is significantly different. Like, in Terra, even your heals aren't targeted. Like, you have to target your heals, and almost all of them are like AoE heals and stuff like that. And, like, you'll lob a little AoE thing. So, I mean, like, you can vary the way that everything is delivered, but I think you have to keep the same function in the beginning. Like, it has to be the same base. What would you guys say?
The only thing I can say is that in order to have this template broken is to introduce gameplay or introduce mechanics and new PvE content itself that would allow for it to be broken. And right now, Blizzard devs are designing raid encounters which reinforce the template, and the 5-man encounters reinforce the template. Anything that happens in a dungeon, basically. A lot of the world bosses, like that Garn Night Owl, they can be kited by a hunter or 2 hunters until you kill it, and you can always do kind of cheesy gimmicks to take down really powerful world bosses when you have that kind of freedom, I guess. I don't see too many people going into a raid or a relevant dungeon and doing the same kind of thing. Probably because the rewards aren't as great if you go in with 2 people. It's probably because you're way overgeared for the place anyway.
Sure.
But I did like in scenarios that the encounters were kind of tough, and the encounters were different just because there were so much of those elements that you just described from Terra, which are a lot of AoEs, and from City of Heroes where you have to kind of avoid. There's avoidable damage, and a lot more of the damage is
interruptible. That's the other thing. Interrupts. There's lots of things in scenarios that you avoided the mechanic by kicking it.
And I think that kind of gameplay is a little bit more engaging. And as far as a reason or incentive for Blizzard to do this, I think it's just the sheer balance or unbalance of the number of people playing DPS roles versus tank and healer roles. I mean, DPS queues in LFR are famously long.
Right, and that would be the reason that you'd want to look at a way to change this so that... Because, I mean, we talked about it before, of that if you could change it to where 5 DPS could go in a dungeon, no one would ever have a wait time for dungeons.
Right.
Ever. I mean, unless there was, 3 people queued and no one else was queuing. But essentially, if you could set it up that way to where dungeons could be tuned, or, encounters and mechanics could be tuned to where it didn't have to hit somebody or something along those lines, or, maybe establish a class that gets a boost if there's not a tank around, so they become like a pseudo tank or something like that, then it would completely remove queue times.
Right, or a little shield one of the people can pick up in the entrance that you carry around as opposed to an offhand, and it helps you block some attacks and helps you function as a tank better without really affecting class mechanics.
Right. Even then, that's still running on tank. At least tank and DPS mechanic. because that all you did then was give somebody a shield and make them become a tank. So that doesn't exactly remove the template.
Somebody still has to volunteer for the role, which is what you do at character creation. But at least in this rate, I mean, people who play hybrid classes probably swap to a tank only when it's really needed, especially if they like doing DPS more kind of fundamentally. And I think that picking up a shield at the beginning of a dungeon is a much different story than leveling up a paladin from 0 in order to fill a tank role.
I wonder if this is on Blizzard's mind at all. It could be, but it just seems so... Well, I don't know. I can't even say that anymore because, I mean, my initial argument for Time Walker was that it's really difficult to figure out how to do it and how to do it well and how to deliver it in a way that people can enjoy. But Blizzard apparently is like, yeah, we figured it out. Here you go. So, I mean, I don't want to say that, if Blizzard is thinking about it, they might be scratching their heads going, I don't know how to do this. There's no way to make this do this and be effective. For all I know, it's going to be in the next patch.
Right, exactly.
Just with the stuff that came out in 6.2, I mean, I don't even know what to think anymore. So, do I think this will ever come to pass in Warcraft? No. Would I like to see it too? Yes. Do I think it'd be very easy to pull off? No. What do you guys think?
Will it ever come in the future? Yes. Will it be easy to pull off? No. Do I think it would be an enjoyable system if they were to move in that direction? Absolutely.
I think it's definitely not happening ever, under any conditions. Just because of the difficulty required. The amount of effort required I don't think would pay off, especially for a game as old as WoW now. Like, for example, if there were like a new MMO, like if Titan ever gets picked back up, or if they make, I don't know, World of Warcraft 2, then maybe I could see that becoming a thing.
The only way I actually see this becoming a thing is when we start running out of players. When Blizzard wants to keep WoW going, but it doesn't have this huge base behind it to make them just... Because, if you get down to a small enough number of players, then it becomes even more difficult to find a tank. It becomes that much more difficult because there's that many less that are playing. And so, at that point, maybe they'll look at a way to supplement groups with non-tanks. But as of right now, I just don't ever see it coming. Alright, let's go ahead and move into the review, shall we? Welcome to the review, everybody. We always review something every week. This is going to be a very short review because we are running right up on that time clock. And we don't want to be here for too long because I don't know if you want to listen to us yap for that long. So we always review something. There's lots and lots of different things that it can be. We chose to go with something that we knew would be a little bit shorter this week, and that is the single boss raid Magtheridon's Lair. It's located in Hellfire Peninsula. It's beneath Hellfire Citadel, and there is just one big giant pit lord for you to kill, and he is a loot pinata. At least that was what his purpose served in the Burning Crusade. You just went to kill him because he was pretty quick, pretty easy, and he gave you loot. We split the review up into 3 different sections: ambience, gameplay, and lore. Ambience being everything you see, hear, feel, etc. Gameplay obviously is, boss mechanics, numbers, loot, trash, etc. And lore is the story. I will ask Evan to step us into ambience, if you would, please.
Well, ambience in this place is very reminiscent of the Hellfire Citadel in general. It's part of the same fortress building, and the entrance, however, is around the back side of it, and it's a little bit unassuming. The entrance is directly in the wall of the thing, and you are at the on the dirt outside of Hellfire Peninsula itself. You're not up on a parapet a rampart or something. You're not in these big tower walls where it's all exciting, and you have a big kind of sense of exposure and kind of fear on almost. It's an epic feeling when you're on top of this place and all the 5-man dungeon entrances are through these big gated portcullis, guarded entrances, but you're on the back side of it, kind of in the backyard. It's just desolate, and you just go down a little ramp, and then you're into his lair now, which I guess used to be his prison, but he's being
still his prison.
Yes, yeah. So it's his lair. It's more like a prison. It's not
I don't know
lair.
why it's called his lair. It is his prison. He's still imprisoned there when we go to kill him.
Exactly. Yeah, which I had forgotten. So you jump down in there. You start going down, because this guy is all the way at the very bottom of this place. And it's got a cool kind of layout. You can go left or right. I'm not sure if you have to clear both sides. I don't think you do. Then his arena is just a giant circle. And this is a 20-man dungeon, I believe,
25.
at the time. 25-man, which is like one of the kind of newer dungeon sizes coming out of the classic environment with all the 40-mans and into this kind of smaller maximum raid size. So although it's big, it is actually kind of reminiscent of the old 40-man raids with the size of the place, but it's been scaled down to 25 people. Plenty of room to move around, plenty of room for some cool mechanics to come out and be pretty impressive visually without feeling like you're banging your head against the ceiling, because the ceiling's pretty tall in this place.
And it's true. There's not a whole lot going on here in terms of ambience. I mean, basic stone. There's lots of corpses all over the place, which I don't understand why people never clean up their dungeons. Like, always in Warcraft, when you're going through a dungeon, it's just like, there's a skeleton, and there's a skull, and there's a body, and it's like, you didn't think, like, I don't know, throw them outside. Or something along those lines. Why are you just leaving that there? It is kind of cool going to where Magtheridon is kept. I mean, he's surrounded by a whole bunch of people who have these weird boxes in front of him that look like wannabe, what are those things called? Rubik's Cubes. And they're channeling spells at Magtheridon to keep him caged. And there's like this crazy fell essence that's surrounding him, and he's, locked down. But it's honestly a pretty simple dungeon. I mean, you come in, you turn right, go down the hall, then there's the boss. It's about as straightforward as Onyxia. What did you think, Florian?
I like the design of the place. The first thing that got to me when I walked in is that it is very, very dark and troubling place. Like, it's not brightly lit. It's huge, but very, very dark, and that it kind of lends it this sort of ominous air, which is very fitting for a place where a pit lord lives, or rather, I guess the pit lord is imprisoned in this particular case. I do agree with your point about all of the random mess lying around. That's something that really bugged me in this dungeon, as it does in many others, as to why they don't clean that up. I mean, like, I'd understand if it was like garbage, or like maybe like, I don't know, a pile of leaves or something. But, this is bones. It's literally corpses. It's an infectious disease thing, They don't want to get sick.
Yeah, orcs definitely can get sick.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, it's almost like they don't want to be successful. They just want to have a bunch of sick days that ruin their productivity and
set themselves up for failure.
Exactly.
Evan, you got massive feedback right now.
I apologize. I don't know where that might have come from. I am experiencing a little bit of hang up on the phone there, but I thought it was all going pretty well.
Okay, it seems to have cleared itself up now. I don't know what that was. That was crazy. Anyway, so Evan, then what would you give ambience for a grade?
Yeah, just not much. I think this place was about the loot. I'm going to give it a C.
Florian?
I feel the ambience was better than a C. That's kind of short selling it, in my opinion. Especially since a lot of the textures still look nice and Magtheridon still look good. I'm going to give it a B. I think it looks like a very solid dungeon.
I'm sitting right at a B-, alongside, right in between both of you. I mean, I state often that stone textures hold up incredibly well because they're very basic. But there's nothing in this dungeon that really wows me. The magical effects surrounding Magtheridon are pretty cool, but other than that, I mean, it's just kind of... There's nothing that even really is very awe-inspiring here. I mean, his chamber is big and it's chained up and stuff like that, which is cool, but it's just like, it's not very relevant feeling. It's just like, there's some big thing in here. And he doesn't even look very epic in terms of some of the things that are around. I mean, he just kind of looks like a dude. I mean, I saw this guy when I stepped through the portal, except it wasn't him. So, I don't know. It was pretty underwhelming, but everything does hold up well, and there's some unique textures and effects going on here. I really, really like the Fel Essence energy that is flowing through his chamber. So that sets me at a B-, which sets the average for ambience at a B-. Florian, would you take gameplay for us, please?
I will. So, the gameplay here is, I think, pretty good. Depends on how you look at it. The trash is not terribly interesting, although they do have some good abilities. One in particular being a sort of a debuff dot ability, which by itself is uninteresting, but it has a special ability of when someone dispels that debuff, the dispeller takes a good chunk of damage and is silenced for, I think, 4 seconds, which is a very, very troublesome ability to deal with, probably. I'm not sure. I didn't do this place out level, so I don't know how it was back in the day, but I can see that becoming an issue. You've got also the channelers in the room surrounding Magtheridon. They're annoying trash too, because they're the kind of trash that summons more trash. They also summon abyssals, which is my least favorite. And
they heal.
Trash. Yeah, they heal too. So they've got, the two really annoying abilities that drag a fight out, which in that particular spot is bad because you have 120 seconds between pulling the first channeler and Magtheridon becoming active and starting the fight. So you have very little time to take them all down, and they've got all these stalling abilities. They can heal, they can summon more adds. It can become very annoying very quickly.
And it can become overwhelming.
It can. Magtheridon himself, not particularly impressive. He's got his first half of the fight is mostly tank and spank, and he occasionally does a big explosive, I think it's called a...
Blast Nova?
Blast Nova? I knew it was something Nova. And you can interrupt that by having players run around and hit all those weird Rubik Cube-looking things around the room.
Yep.
The Manticron cubes. Cubes.
Yep.
That's what they're called. It sounds cool. I'm not sure it means anything, though. That's pretty much his main thing he's got going on, is the occasional Blast Nova. And then eventually the ceiling starts caving in, and, it's the basic don't stand where things are about to fall on you mechanic. Nothing terribly complicated. It's not super complex mechanics, but enough that it can stay challenging enough for what Magtheridon is supposed to be, which is a loot pinata.
Yeah, and he dropped a 20-slot bag. That was a huge deal.
That too.
Wait, was it 20 or 22? I don't know.
They're big bags.
Either way, it was a big bag. That was one of the things that you wanted more than anything else from him. You're like, can I get the bag? and you're like, and no matter what, I mean, he only dropped one. It was unique equip, so you could only have one. And it was just a big deal to get that bag. It's a 20-slot Pit Lord Satchel. And, bag space now is becoming so much less relevant because we have 30-slot bags and you can have 4 of them. But, I mean, this was back at a time when you had reagents to use for your abilities and stuff like that. This wasn't, you had to carry a ton of stuff with your mounts were still in your bags.
Right.
So, I mean, you had, it's like you literally, unloaded your bag and a bird fell out. Because Warcraft. So
another big bag of that expansion was the Harris Fulton, the vendor in Shatrath that sold the Gigantique bag, I think. And I don't know how many slots. Yeah, Harris Fulton. I can't remember how many slots that one had.
22.
In relation.
But it cost 3,000 gold.
So that's about as much as your epic flying.
Which at the time was just ridiculous amounts of money.
Exactly. Very few people had the 310% flying. I think that was 5,000 gold, if I'm not mistaken, on top of 280% flying, which I think was the same price. I can't remember exactly, but if the Harris Pilton bag was 22 slots and this Magtheridon bag,
yes.
sorry,
the Gigantic bag is 22 slots. It's sold by Harris Pilton, and its current price is listed at 1,200, which I do not believe is anywhere close to what it used to be.
Might be right. That was a pretty exclusive bag, though, for a pretty exclusive price of money. I know I've never even thought about buying it. Never crossed my mind once. And I was a druid, so I was carrying around 3 different gear sets, so that gave you a little bit of perspective into the thing.
Right.
It was, the bag off Magtheridon was a big deal.
But the sad thing about the gameplay of this is that he was actually pretty easy even for new players to raiding, so he really did just become a loot pinata. It was like, did you go to your Magtheridon this week? I mean, so unfortunately, he had interesting mechanics. I liked the cube thing like you were talking about, but unfortunately, his just tuning was too low. So with that, I am going to be giving him probably like C minus. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. And at the time, though, his loot was pretty relevant. But his abilities and the enjoyment from the raid itself was pretty weak because he didn't do very much. And the only real interesting mechanic was just tapping all the cubes. But meh. What do you guys think?
I think it kind of served a purpose. I would give it a B+, because not that he's incredibly inspiring, but in the raid climate of that expansion at that time, he was a really good way to get groups to get organized, to get them into the higher, capacity raids. I don't think anybody would have stepped foot inside of Serpentine Cavern, much less Tempest Keep, if they weren't able to kind of cut their teeth on bosses like Gruul and Magtheridon. And I think that was their purpose.
He also helped you get ready for Karazhan.
Exactly. Well, Karazhan was a smaller size. It might be easier to even organize a Karazhan run with your guild than it would be to organize a Magtheridon run if you didn't want to pug a bunch of people. Karazhan was pretty easy from Ottoman the Huntsman as a first fight. I think it was challenging, but it wasn't impossible. Magtheridon, it's easy, but the hard part is getting those 20 people together. And as a new guild, new raid leader, I think it had a definite niche in the context of that time.
Well, Magtheridon was treated as kind of like a world boss. You just got a group together and went and killed him, and that was the end of it.
Right.
What do you think, Florian? Where are you sitting on in gameplay?
I think it's a B. There's nothing super original or inspiring, but, like Evan said, it was serviceable, and it was what was needed at the time. Magtheridon is a very specific type of boss, a loot pinata boss to help you get geared, and he does the job he needs to do while not being too easy and just being a straight-up pushover. And like I said, his trash can be somewhat annoying. Good trash should be at least a little annoying. So
all right.
I feel all around good serviceable mechanics.
Wonderful. All right. I will give us our little intro into lore. His lore is unfortunately a little bit more difficult to find. You have to... Unfortunately, what I'm realizing as we do these reviews is the way that most lore in Warcraft is relatively difficult to find. So after Outland, the original Outland, got blown up, he was sent there by Archimonde or Kil'jaeden, one of those two, I don't know, and to take over what was left. So he took over like the remaining orcs and tainted them with his blood, which turned them red into the Fel orcs, which are the orcs you see upstairs in like Hellfire Citadel and all that, and he ruled Outland. When Illidan tried to run away from Kil'jaeden and ran here, him, Kael'thas, and Lady Vaj uprooted his seat, took over everything, and then stuck him down here in the bottom of Hellfire Citadel and trapped him to continuously use his blood to make more Fel orcs. Because they were, bigger, stronger, faster, harder? Is that the other word for that song? Bigger, harder, stronger, faster. I don't know. I haven't heard that song in a while. Anyway, and as we're trying to stop Illidan, well, this is just another one of the tools that Illidan has, so we have to go in here and stop it. And that's essentially the entirety of the lore that is encompassed around Magtheridon. The one thing that I would like to state, though, that I get really frustrated with is people constantly confuse Manaroth with Magtheridon.
Right.
And I don't like that, because they're completely different. I remember in the Warlord cinematic, everyone's like, man, he took down Magtheridon all by himself. And it's like, that's not Magtheridon, that's Manaroth. But, it is what it is. He has a very basic story. He's a pretty basic bad guy. What do you guys think?
He's basic bad guy.
He's an evil guy that got betrayed by an evil guy that was working for the same evil guy that he worked for.
Sorry, you're getting a little too generic. We still talking about Warcraft?
Yeah, we totally are.
Yeah, that's funny. He's again, not the biggest, baddest dude out there, but for a facial kind of encounter, that's not what you want. You don't want that to be the Lich King.
No.
Or Kael'thas himself, certainly. So, I mean, that's just his shtick. That's his place in life. He kind of had his, 40 years of fame being top dog, and now he's just illustrating what happens to the people who consort with the Burning Legion, I guess. It's just like a case example.
But he was made by the Burning Legion. He's a pit lord.
Exactly.
Well,
and that's just how they roll.
We don't actually technically know the origin of them, do we? I mean, and technically, I suppose that Magtheridon isn't dead, because after you kill a demon in Warcraft, they just go back to the Void Nether? Void whatever? The thing that people always try and argue why Illidan is still alive, because when you kill a demon, they don't actually die. They just go back to hell, essentially. That's
certainly how it works in some other mythologies. I don't think I have any recollection of that being mentioned particular to Warcraft. Though, for some reason, the Richard Knack series is... his Dragon Soul series, I think, is stirring up some old memories about that, though. Or maybe it was the Well of Eternity series.
I don't know. What were you about to say, Florian?
Yeah, I was going to kind of agree with Evan on that. I know it works like that in other Blizzard franchises, like Diablo, for example, but I'm pretty sure, WoW, that when you kill a demon, he stays dead. Because the WoW demons aren't like from hell so much as they are just aliens, basically.
No. I'm positive that's how it works, because it's the same area that warlocks summon their demons from. And that's why your demon is always named the same way, even after it dies, because you just re-summon it from the Twisting Nether, or whatever it's called.
Ooh, that's a good point.
I wonder if that's more just for gameplay mechanics, though. I don't know. I don't know, until I see something solid that tells me that demons are not permanently killable, then I'm just going to be very, very skeptical of that theory.
If I had more time, I would look it up.
I think the Warlock pet continuity is a good piece of evidence supporting that point. Because, but in contrast, the Death Knight ghoul has a different name every time. And that's just because you happen to be summoning...
A different dead guy.
Some random skeleton nearby.
So, random question that's not entirely on topic, since we mentioned warlocks. Will warlocks ever get the ability to summon a pit lord?
Maybe.
That would be awesome.
That seems... It would be awesome, but it seems like the kind of thing...
No. Demonology locks. I don't know how they'd have to do it. Like, maybe they'd have to have full demonic essence or whatever it's called. They can, instead of turning into the Illidan thing, they can turn into a pit lord. No?
I don't think that would be a good idea, because already right now, when they transform, they don't feel as strong as they should be, at least to me. Like, if you turned into a pit lord, I don't know how you could possibly balance that to make it feel like you're strong enough, and at the same time not be disgustingly overpowered.
I don't know. Anyway.
It would look cool, though.
Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add on to lore, though?
No, I mean, we could add on that you also interact a little bit with Magtheridon, in Blood Furnace itself, where I guess you kill this guy, Grandmaster Vorpal. No, that's the guy from Shadow Labs. You kill this warlock who is trying to contain his essence. You fight the same guy again in Warlords of Draenor, who's alternate universe, same guy. Can't remember where. And when you kill him in Blood Furnace, you disrupt the containment or whatever. So going back down into Magtheridon's lair, where he seems to still be contained, do you guys know how that interaction might be working and what we actually did when we were in Blood Furnace that maybe allowed us to go down there and finish the job afterwards?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it did seem weird that they constantly had people channeling on him, so if what you're saying is true, that we did disrupt it somehow. I mean, because the door is open, there's people in here channeling spells on him. I don't understand why that would be a reasonable way to contain him for a long period of time. I think it'd be easier to just devise a cage that kept him still, which it looks like originally they had with the weird magic and stuff that's around his cage. But if we did disrupt that somehow, then that would make sense.
Yeah, maybe they're rebuilding the containment. But then again, he was there channeling on it constantly in the first place. So, I don't know. Yeah, maybe he was tougher than they imagined to keep under control, and they were kind of struggling the whole time, and here we come traipsing around like a elephant in a china shop, by their opinion. So,
all right, well, I give it a B+. It's not exactly the most, complicated story, but it's not bad. It's there. It works. It's good enough. I mean, it serves its purpose. I don't feel like, the lore is there. I don't feel like it's terrible. It's just very basic. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Evan?
I agree with you on the B+. I think it's perfectly fine. It doesn't overpromise. It doesn't underdeliver. I think it's just a cool pit lord guy that has a good reason for being there, and you have a good reason for killing him and getting the loot. That's Florian. All I ask.
Yeah, I would also give it a B+. For the first time, we all agree on our score. And, it's serviceable loot. It's serviceable lore, rather, not loot. Sorry, I got loot on the brain all the time now. It's serviceable lore. It does what it needs to do without going overboard. So, yeah.
Loot.
Except my inventory is full, so I can't actually loot anything from him.
You're going to need a bigger bag.
I do need bigger bags. Actually, it's full. I have a whole bunch of alts now. Oh, anyway, before I say this, final score, B, above average, does what it needs to. Congratulations, you don't suck. No, I have so many alts, but I don't want to devote time to, all of them. So I'll just, log on, do the garrisons, log off. And so my bags are constantly filling up with stuff from my garrison rewards. So it's I got 3 talismans of the true treasure tracking. I could probably free up 10 slots if I just turned all the tokens into actual armor and weapon upgrades. I got God knows how many pieces of gear that just need turned into pieces of gear. Don't judge me. Anyway. Okay, it was a long show, everybody. We went about 15 minutes over our 2 hours, which I'm glad we managed to only make it 15 minutes over, because considering how much news there was, that could have went so much longer. Thank you. As always, please send your questions and feedback to the castbar@gmail.com. Send us a tweet at Castbar Podcast, or call and leave a voicemail at 508-738-2278. Again, the winner of our Iron Skyreaver Giveaway is David C. Hopefully we get a hold of him in the near future. And congratulations, and everyone, please keep your eyes open, as I'm sure we'll be doing another giveaway in the near future. You can find all of our old shows on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. If there's anywhere else that you need them to be, please let me know. You alright there, Evan?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's alright. The music for all of our bumpers is done by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at incomtech.com. It's all royalty free, so use it and give him credit, or buy it and don't. If you'd like to get a hold of me, my Twitter is at Schwahn Michael, which is SCHWAHN. Evan, where are people able to find you?
You can find me on Twitter at EDCWow.
And Florian.
You should email me at the Castbar, at our regular Castbar email address. If you want to follow me on Twitter at Phalanx, at FALANGX, you can, but I don't really tweet, so don't look forward to too much.
All right, guys. Well, I look forward to however big a pile of news there's going to be next week, because I am almost positive there's going to be tons of it again. But as always, we'll have a closer look. We'll have a review. Hopefully we'll have some mail. Take it easy, guys. Have a good day.
See ya, you too.
You are out of time.